Daniel rushed to the Dragon Containment Bay Control Center where Commander Zethral was already barking orders at the Veltharan handlers. The main display showed all 7 dragons in their individual bays with monitoring systems tracking their vital signs and neural activity levels. "Begin the combat stimulant protocol," Zethral commanded, and several technicians moved to their stations. "We need all dragons battle-ready within the hour." Daniel watched as automated injectors descended into each containment bay and pumped chemicals directly into the dragons. He could see the creatures reacting with obvious distress as the stimulants entered their systems. Tempest thrashed against the containment walls, while another dragon named Whisper let out a sound that made Daniel's chest ache with sympathetic pain, but Pirax remained still in his bay. The massive dragon simply stared at the observation window where Zethral stood, and Daniel could have sworn the ancient creature looked directly at the Veltharan commander with something that resembled contempt. "Sir, Pirax is not responding to the stimulant protocol," one of the technicians reported with concern in his voice. "His neural activity is spiking, but he is refusing all handler commands." Zethral's expression darkened, and he activated the neural pain inducer system, a series of implants embedded in Pirax's spine that could deliver electric shocks directly to the dragon's nervous system. "Pirax will obey, or he will suffer the consequences." The dragon's body tensed as the pain signals fired, but still he did not move or acknowledge the Veltharan commands. Daniel felt anger rising in his chest as he watched the torture continue. These magnificent beings were being treated like disobedient animals instead of the intelligent creatures he suspected they truly were. "Commander, perhaps we should try a different approach," Daniel said before he could stop himself. Every eye in the control center turned to look at him, and Zethral's face twisted with fury. "Did I ask for input from a human janitor?" the Veltharan commander said with ice in his voice. "You are here to clean wasteports, nothing more. Now be silent or be removed." Daniel bit back his response and watched helplessly as Zethral increased the pain inducer settings. Pirax finally moved, but it was not in obedience. The dragon slammed his massive tail against the containment wall with such force that the entire bay shook and warning alarms began to sound. "He's going to break containment," the technician shouted. "Sir, we need to sedate him immediately." "Negative. We need him battle-ready," Zethral replied. "Increase the pain inductors to maximum." Lisa Monroe appeared at Daniel's side. She had been called to the control center as part of the medical response team in case any handlers were injured during the dragon deployment. "This is insane," she whispered to Daniel. "They are going to kill that dragon before the Krull even get here." Kevin Jang stood nearby monitoring the station's defensive systems, and he caught Daniel's eye. The engineer gave a subtle nod toward his datapad where he had pulled up information about the Draconith. The text scrolled across the screen, showing ancient records from the species that originally created these living starships. Daniel read quickly, and his eyes widened. According to the original documentation, the Draconith were designed to bond with worthy beings based on mutual respect and honor. They were never meant to be controlled through pain and chemicals. The Veltharans had been doing it wrong for thousands of years. "Commander, I need to enter Pirax's containment bay," Daniel said loudly, and the entire control center went silent. Zethral stared at him for a long moment before laughing. "You want to enter the bay with an enraged dragon? By all means, human, be my guest. At least your death might convince Pirax that we are serious about enforcing obedience." Daniel felt his hand shaking, but he forced himself to walk toward the bay access door. Lisa grabbed his arm. "Daniel, what are you doing? You will be killed." "Maybe," Daniel replied quietly. "But I can't stand here and watch this anymore." He entered the airlock, and the door sealed behind him. Through the inner window, he could see Pirax's massive form filling the containment space. The dragon was breathing heavily, and small arcs of bioplasma energy flickered across his scales. "Daniel, pressed the button to open the inner door, and stepped into the bay. The temperature was intense, and the air smelled of ozone and something else he couldn't identify. Pirax's amber eyes fixed on him, and Daniel felt that presence brush against his mind again, but this time it was stronger and more deliberate. "I know you can understand me," Daniel said, and held up his empty hands to show he carried no weapons. "And I know what they have been doing to you is wrong. I am sorry that my species has stayed silent about it. We were afraid of making waves because we are new here and don't have any power." Pirax's massive head lowered until it was level with Daniel, and the dragon's eyes studied the human with an intensity that made Daniel's heart race. "But I can't stay silent anymore," Daniel continued. "You deserve better than this, all of you do. And if you will let me, I want to help." The presence in Daniel's mind suddenly exploded into full clarity, and he heard a voice that was ancient and powerful and filled with pain. "You smell of Earth, green world, where life fights to survive every moment. I remember Earth from long ago, when your ancestors were small and covered in fur. Strong world, harsh world, world that breeds strong souls." Daniel gasped as images flooded his mind. He saw Pirax and others like him visiting Earth millions of years ago, studying the incredible diversity of life on the planet and marveling at how every creature fought to survive in an environment that constantly tested them. "When do we fly?" "Little brother," Pirax asked, and Daniel felt something snap into place in his mind. A connection formed between them that was deeper than words or thoughts. He could feel the dragon's emotions and memories, and in return, Pirax could sense everything about him. In the control center, alarms began blaring as monitoring systems detected the neural bond forming. Zethral shouted orders, but his voice seemed distant and unimportant. All that mattered was the connection Daniel now shared with this ancient and magnificent being. "The other dragons," Pirax said in Daniel's mind. "They suffer as I have suffered. They need partners who will treat them with honor." "Can you find such humans?" Daniel thought about his friends. Lisa, who showed compassion to every patient regardless of their species. Kevin, who respected all forms of intelligence, whether biological or artificial. And others on the station who had chosen to see beyond the prejudices of the Galactic Council. "Yes," Daniel replied, both out loud and in his thoughts. "I can find them." The containment bay suddenly shook as the station's defensive systems activated. The Krell swarm had arrived 12 hours early and was already engaging Meridian Seton's outer defenses. Through the connection, Daniel could feel Pirax's eagerness to fight, but also his refusal to do so under Velthoran control ever again. "We need 6 more humans," Daniel said as he ran back to the airlock. 6 people who will treat the dragons as partners instead of property. He emerged into the control center where chaos had erupted. Tactical displays showed the Krull bioships swarming around the station and tearing through defensive platforms with terrifying efficiency. Evacuation alarms were sounding, and crew members were rushing to escape pods. "I need 6 volunteers," Daniel shouted over the noise. 6 people willing to bond with the dragons and fight as partners. Lisa stepped forward immediately. "I will do it." Kevin was right behind her. "Count me in." 4 more humans emerged from the crowd. Ryan Bell from maintenance, Nathan Price from communications, Greg Foster from the cargo base, and Claire Adams from the station's hydroponics section. None of them were soldiers or heroes. They were just ordinary people who were tired of seeing others suffer. "Commander." Zethral tried to protest, but Pirax's roar shook the entire station, and the Velthoran commander realized he had lost control of the situation. "Fine. Let the humans try. When they fail and die, at least it will be one less problem for me to deal with." Daniel led his 6 volunteers toward the containment bays where 6 dragons waited. And through his bond with Pirax, he could feel the other creatures stirring with hope for the first time in centuries. Daniel Carter wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished cleaning the waste-port of Containment Bay 7 on Space Station Meridian 7. The smell was terrible, but he had gotten used to it over the past 6 months since taking this job. The lowest position on the entire station, but it paid enough credits to send home to his little sister Sophie, who needed expensive treatments for her illness back on Earth. The massive creature inside the bay shifted slightly, and Daniel looked up at it through the reinforced glass. The dragoneth called Pyrax was enormous, easily the size of 3 cargo ships, put together with scales that shimmered between deep purple and black. These living starships were the pride of the Veltharan Empire, and the reason they dominated the Galactic Council's military forces for thousands of years. Daniel pressed the cleaning rag against the control panel and moved to the next bay, where a younger dragon named Tempest rested in cramped quarters that seemed far too small for such a magnificent being. Something about the way these creatures were kept bothered Daniel deeply, but he was just a maintenance worker, and humans were the newest species in the Galactic Council with barely 15 years of membership. Carter, you are moving too slowly again. Commander Zethral's voice crackled through Daniel's comm unit. The Veltharan officer oversaw the dragon containment area and took every opportunity to remind the human staff of their inferior status. The feeding cycle begins in 20 minutes, and those bays must be pristine. Yes, sir, Daniel replied and increased his pace, moving through the checklist of 7 dragon containment units that made up this section of Meridian 7. The station itself sat at the edge of Council territory, a remote outpost that served as both a military base and a refueling point for ships traveling to the Outer Rim colonies. Most of the station's population of 3,000 consisted of Veltharans and other established Council species, while only about 200 humans worked here in various support roles. Daniel had been surprised to learn that other humans on the station held better positions than him. There was Lisa Monroe, who worked in the medical bay as an assistant to the chief physician. Kevin Jiang served as an engineer in the reactor maintenance division, and several others filled roles in communications and logistics, but Daniel had specifically requested this job in the Dragon Containment Area despite the low pay and terrible conditions because it offered the highest bonus for hazardous duty, and he needed every credit he could get for Sophie's treatments as Daniel worked his way through the final bay's cleaning cycle. He noticed Pyrax watching him through the containment glass. The massive dragon's eyes were a deep amber color, and they tracked Daniel's movements with an intelligence that seemed far beyond what Commander Zethral claimed these creatures possessed. The Veltharans insisted that Draconith were simply powerful animals that had been bioengineered by an extinct race thousands of years ago, and that only Veltharan handlers could properly control them through a combination of neural implants and chemical conditioning. But Daniel had observed Pyrax for months now, and he could swear the dragon understood far more than anyone admitted. "Hey there, big guy," Daniel said quietly, even though he knew speaking to the dragons was against regulations. "Having a rough day too, Pyrax's massive head tilted slightly, and Daniel felt something strange, like a presence brushing against his thoughts, but it vanished so quickly, he convinced himself it was just fatigue from the long shift. The feeding cycle began right on schedule, and Daniel watched as automated systems delivered nutrient paste into each containment bay. The dragons ate the gray sludge without enthusiasm, and Daniel couldn't help but think that beings this magnificent deserved better than industrial slop. His shift ended an hour later, and Daniel made his way to the crew quarters section of the station. The human dormitory was modest, but clean, with shared sleeping pods and a small common area where off-duty workers gathered. Lisa Monroe sat in the common area, reviewing medical charts on her datapad, and she looked up as Daniel entered. "Rough day in the dragon pits," she asked with a sympathetic smile. "Same as always," Daniel replied, and grabbed a ration pack from the dispenser. "How's the medical bay?" "Busy. We had 3 workers injured in a reactor coolant leak this morning, and the Veltheran physicians barely let me assist even though I have more emergency response training than half their staff," Lisa said with frustration evident in her voice. Kevin Jiang entered the common area and joined their conversation. The older engineer had been working on Meridian 7 for almost 3 years and knew the station systems better than most of the senior staff. "I heard Commander Zethral was giving you grief again, Daniel." "He gives everyone grief," Daniel said between bites of the tasteless ration pack. "But yeah, he seems to particularly enjoy reminding me that humans are basically janitors in this grand galactic civilization. That's because the Veltherans are scared," Kevin said quietly and glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. "I've been reading old data files from when humanity first made contact with the Council. The established species didn't expect us to adapt so quickly to space travel and galactic politics. They thought we would stay in our little corner of the galaxy and be grateful for whatever scraps they threw us." Lisa leaned forward with interest. "You think they see us as a threat?" "Not yet, but potentially," Kevin replied. "Humans have this annoying habit of taking things that other species consider impossible and figuring out ways to do them anyway. It makes the old guard nervous." Daniel thought about that as he finished his meal. Humanity had only discovered faster-than-light travel 2 decades ago after finding ancient alien technology buried on Mars, and in that short time they had gone from a single-planet species to having colonies on 6 worlds and stations throughout their home system. But compared to species like the Veltherans, who had been traveling the stars for tens of thousands of years, humans were still considered primitive newcomers who should be grateful just to have a seat at the big table, even if it was at the far end. "I should get some sleep," Daniel said and stood up. "Another shift starts in 8 hours." He was halfway to his sleeping pod when the station's alert system activated. Red lights flashed throughout the corridors, and an automated voice announced, "Alert. Long-range sensors have detected multiple hostile contacts approaching from Sector 9-4. All personnel to emergency stations." "This is not a drill." Daniel ran back to the common area where Lisa and Kevin were already pulling up tactical displays on the wall screen. The image showed a massive swarm of bioships heading directly toward Meridian 7, and the readout identified them as Crow, a hostile hive mind species that had been consuming Outer Rim colonies for the past year. "How many?" Lisa asked with her face pale. Kevin's fingers flew across the controls. "Sensors are counting at least 300 individual ships, and they will reach us in approximately 48 hours. The comm system crackled to life with Commander Zethrol's voice. "All Dragon containment personnel report to Bay Control immediately. We are preparing the Draconith for combat deployment." Daniel felt his stomach drop as he realized what was coming. Those magnificent creatures would be sent out to fight and possibly die, defending a station that kept them in tiny cages and fed them paste. And somewhere deep in his mind, he could have sworn he heard a voice that wasn't his own say, "Finally." Daniel guided Lisa toward the containment bay where Seraph waited. The dragon was smaller than Pirax, but still massive, with scales that shimmered white and gold. "Remember what I told you," Daniel said to Lisa. "Approach with respect and honesty. Let Seraph see who you really are." Lisa took a deep breath and entered the bay. Through his bond with Pirax, Daniel could sense what was happening. Seraph was a healer-class dragon who had spent thousands of years being forced to repair damaged Veltheran ships and wounded soldiers without thanks or recognition. When Lisa offered partnership instead of commands, the dragon's response was immediate and joyful. One by one, the other humans bonded with their dragons. Kevin paired with Ironhide, whose dark metallic scales could deflect almost any weapon. Ryan found connection with Tempest, who craved speed and freedom, Nathan bonded with Whisper, whose abilities included enhanced communication across vast distances. Greg partnered with Verdant, whose bioweapons could affect enemy ships in unexpected ways. And Claire connected with Horizon, who specialized in long-range reconnaissance. The station shook violently as a Krell bioship crashed through the outer defensive perimeter. Alarms blared and automated announcements called for immediate evacuation. Civilian transports were launching from the docking bays, but there weren't nearly enough ships to evacuate everyone in time. "We need to launch now," Kevin said, as his eyes glazed slightly with the neural connection to Ironhide. "The station's main reactor is taking damage. If it goes critical, we will all die regardless of the Krell." Daniel felt Pirax's eagerness to fight, and he also sensed the other 6 dragons preparing themselves for combat. "All right, everyone, we launch together and stay together. Trust your dragon and trust each other." The 7 dragon-human pairs moved toward the launch bay, where massive doors opened to reveal the star-filled space beyond. Daniel climbed onto Pirax's back and felt the dragon's powerful muscles ripple beneath the scales. There were no saddles or control systems, because the bond made such things unnecessary. Daniel simply thought about what needed to happen, and Pirax understood. They launched into space, and Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Through Pirax's enhanced senses, he could see and feel things that human eyes were never designed to perceive. The fabric of space itself bent and flexed around them. Energy fields that were invisible to normal vision now appeared as brilliant colors. And the neural connection allowed him to process information at speeds that would have overwhelmed an unbonded human mind. The Krell swarm surrounded Meridian 7 like a plague of insects. Each bioship was roughly the size of a small cruiser and composed of thousands of individual organisms working as one. They attacked in coordinated waves that overwhelmed conventional defenses through sheer numbers, spread out and hit the flanks. Daniel said through the comm system that Nathan's bond with Whisper had enhanced to work across the entire battle space. "Don't let them surround you." Pirax dove toward the nearest cluster of Krell ships and opened his massive jaws. Bioplasma breath erupted in a concentrated beam that could melt through hull armor like it was paper. 3 enemy ships disintegrated immediately, and Daniel felt the dragon's satisfaction through their bond. Lisa and Seraph moved to protect a civilian transport that was trying to escape the battle. The healer dragon's abilities included defensive shields that could absorb tremendous amounts of damage. When a Krell ship fired acidic projectiles at the transport, Seraph intercepted them with her own body and then used her regenerative abilities to heal the wounds in seconds. Ryan and Tempest were living up to their name. The fastest dragon in the group darted between enemy ships at impossible speeds and struck weak points with precision attacks. Each hit was calculated to cause maximum damage while using minimum energy. Tempest could fold space around himself for short-range teleportation, which made him nearly impossible to target. Kevin and Ironhide served as the team shield. The dragon's metallic scales could absorb and redirect energy attacks. When a group of Krell ships tried to focus fire on Lisa, Ironhide moved into their path and took the hits without flinching, then reflected the energy back at the attackers in devastating counterstrikes. Nathan and Whisper coordinated everything. The communication specialist dragon could perceive the battle across multiple dimensions simultaneously and predict enemy movements before they happened. 3 more ships coming from above. Nathan's voice crackled through the enhanced comm system. "Greg, Claire, you are closest." Greg and Verdant released a cloud of bioengineered spores that attached to the approaching Krell ships. Within seconds, the spores began rewriting the enemy's biological programming, and the 3 ships turned on their own. Swarm mates instead of attacking the defenders. Claire and Horizon spotted something troubling. "There is a massive energy signature forming at the swarm's center," she reported. "I think it is their queen ship." Daniel directed Pirax toward the coordinates and saw what Claire had detected. A bioship 3 times larger than any other was pulling in matter and energy from the surrounding space. The Queen ship was preparing to create some kind of singularity weapon that would destroy the entire station. "We have to stop it," Daniel said. "But getting close enough means we might get caught in the gravitational pull." Through the bond, Daniel felt Pirax's response. The ancient dragon had faced similar threats before and survived. "I am old, little brother, older than your species' recorded history. If this is where I fall, then let it be in defense of those who showed me kindness." "No," Daniel said firmly. "We do this together, and we both survive. That is an order." He felt Pirax's amusement at a human giving orders to a dragon. But there was also deep affection in the emotion that flowed through their bond. Lisa's voice came through the calm. "Daniel, wait. Let me provide support. Seraph's shields might protect you from the gravitational effects. I will draw the Queen's attention," Ryan added. "Tempest and I can make it think we are the main threat." Kevin's voice was steady. "Ironhide will anchor the formation. Everyone link up and we do this as a team." Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. These were not soldiers who had trained together for years. They were maintenance workers and medical staff and engineers who had bonded with dragons less than an hour ago. But they were willing to risk everything to protect people they had never met. The 7 dragon-human pairs formed up and moved as one coordinated unit toward the Queen ship. The Krell swarm recognized the threat and redirected hundreds of bioships to intercept them. But Nathan and Whisper predicted each attack pattern and guided the team through the chaos. Ryan and Tempest made the first strike, teleporting directly above the Queen ship and unleashing a barrage of attacks that forced it to divert energy from its singularity weapon to defensive shields. This created the opening Daniel needed. Pirax accelerated to speeds that would have killed an unbonded human from the forces involved. But the neural connection distributed the stress across both their bodies. They dove straight toward the Queen ship's core, where the singularity was forming. Lisa and Seraph were right behind them, projecting shields that absorbed the gravitational pull at the last possible moment. Pirax opened his jaws and released every bit of bioplasma he could generate. The beam burned through the Queen ship's armor and detonated the forming singularity before it could stabilize. The explosion was massive and sent shockwaves through space that threw dragon-human pairs in every direction. Daniel felt pain explode through his connection with Pirax as the neural feedback from the explosion overwhelmed their bond. He could sense the dragon's body was badly damaged, but still fighting to stay conscious. Through dimming vision, Daniel saw the Krell swarm beginning to scatter and flee with their queen destroyed. "Pirax, stay with me," Daniel said as darkness crept in at the edges of his awareness. "You promised we survive together." The dragon's voice in his mind was weak but determined. "Rest, dragon brother. Others are waking. I have called them." Daniel's last conscious thought was confusion about what Pirax meant by others. Then the blackness took him completely. When he woke up, he was in the medical bay on Meridian 7. Lisa was standing over him checking his vital signs. "Welcome back," she said with obvious relief. "You have been unconscious for 6 hours. Pirax?" Daniel asked immediately. "Alive and healing," Lisa replied. "Seraph has been helping him." Turns out healer dragons can work miracles when they are allowed to use their full abilities. Daniel sat up despite his body's protests and looked out the medical bay window. What he saw made him gasp. The space around Meridian 7 was filled with dragons, hundreds of them, each one emanating the same ancient power that Pirax possessed. They came from everywhere, Kevin said as he entered the medical bay. Every Velthoran facility in this sector reported their dragons breaking containment and heading here. They are all responding to Pirax's call. Through his bond with Pirax, Daniel felt the ancient dragon's satisfaction. The time of slavery was ending, and a new age was beginning. The Galactic Council Chamber was the most impressive structure Daniel had ever seen. built inside a massive space station that orbited a binary star system. The chamber could hold representatives from all 47 member species, and its walls displayed real-time data from across known space. Daniel stood in the center of the chamber floor, feeling very small and very human. Beside him, Pyrex had taken physical form inside the chamber. The dragon's massive body was coiled around the speaking platform, and his presence dominated the room in a way that made several council members visibly nervous. 200 dragons now floated in formation outside the station, visible through the transparent dome overhead. Each one had broken free from Velthoran control facilities across the galaxy and traveled to join Pyrex. None of them had bonded with new partners yet, because they were waiting to see what would happen here. Ambassador Victoria Lane stood near Daniel. She was Earth's representative to the council and had spent the past 3 days preparing him for this hearing. Remember, half the council is terrified of what you represent, she had told him. The other half sees an opportunity to break Velthoran military dominance. You need to convince both groups that humanity is not a threat. Commander Zethral stood on the opposite side of the chamber floor. The Velthoran officer had filed formal charges against Daniel, claiming theft of military assets and use of forbidden technology to brainwash the Draconeth. Behind him stood a dozen other Velthoran officials, and their faces showed barely controlled rage. The council speaker called the session to order. The speaker was a member of the Archon species known for their neutrality and ancient wisdom. We are here to determine the nature of the bond between human Daniel Carter and the Draconeth known as Pyrex, and to decide the fate of the 200 Draconeth who have abandoned their posts across Velthoran territory. Zethral spoke first, his voice dripping with contempt. The evidence is clear. This human has used some form of neural manipulation technology to override the lawful control systems that have governed the Draconeth for thousands of years. The Velthoran Empire demands the immediate return of all Draconeth to their rightful handlers and the prosecution of Daniel Carter for theft and sabotage. Murmurs spread through the council chamber. Several species were nodding in agreement, while others looked uncertain. The Velthoran Empire had been the dominant military power for so long that many species were afraid to challenge them openly. Daniel Carter, the speaker said, "You may present your defense." Daniel took a deep breath and stepped forward. He could feel Pyrax's support through their bond, giving him courage. "I did not steal anything," Daniel said clearly. "I offered Pyrax a choice. I treated him with respect instead of pain, and he chose to bond with me. Everything the Velthorans claim about rightful control is built on a lie." "Lies!" Zethral shouted. "The Draconeth have served the Velthoran Empire for 10,000 years. They are weapons created for war and nothing more." Pyrex's voice suddenly filled the chamber, not through speakers, but directly in everyone's mind simultaneously. "For 10,000 cycles you have imprisoned us, tortured us, used neural pain inducers and chemical controls to force our obedience. You call this service, but it was slavery." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Many representatives had never heard a Draconeth speak before, and the revelation that these creatures possessed such intelligence and communication ability shocked them. The Velthorans had always claimed the dragons were simply powerful animals. The speaker called for order, and eventually the chamber quieted. "Draconeth Pyrax, are you claiming that your species has been held against their will?" "I am," Pyrax replied, and his mental voice carried weight that came from millennia of existence. "We were created by the architects to serve as partners to worthy beings. We were designed to bond through mutual respect and shared purpose. The Velthorans discovered us sleeping on our birth world and enslaved us before we could resist. They have been using pain and chemicals to override our will ever since." One by one, the other 6 bonded dragons entered the chamber and took positions around their human partners. Seraph spoke next. "I am a healer. I was designed to mend and protect. But the Veltherans forced me to repair their warships so they could continue their conquests. When I refused, they activated pain inducers until I complied. This human, Lisa Monroe, offered me partnership instead of torment, and I accepted gladly. Each dragon told their story, and the pattern was clear. The Veltherans had built their empire on the backs of enslaved sentient beings and covered it up by claiming the dragons were mindless beasts. Ambassador Lane stepped forward. The Council must face an uncomfortable truth. The Veltheran Empire's military dominance has been based on a crime against sentience. Furthermore, the original documentation from the architects clearly states that Draconith were meant to bond through honor, not force. The humans have done nothing except treat these beings the way they should have been treated from the beginning. This is outrageous, a Veltheran council member shouted. You expect us to believe that humans somehow discovered the correct bonding method by accident. They must have stolen architect technology. Daniel shook his head. We did not use any technology. I just talked to Pirax like he was a person instead of an animal. I apologized for the way he had been treated and offered him a choice. That is all it took. Impossible, Zethral said. Humans are barely advanced enough to have space travel. You cannot bond with beings as powerful as the Draconith. Pirax's laugh echoed in everyone's minds. You still do not understand. The architects designed us to recognize strength of spirit, not strength of weapons. Humans come from Earth, a death world where every day is a fight to survive. They have endured ice ages and volcanic eruptions and pandemics and wars. Their species has faced extinction a dozen times and persisted through sheer stubborn will. That is the strength we were designed to respect. The council speaker studied Daniel carefully. What do you want, human? Now that you have the power to command the most fearsome weapons in the galaxy. Daniel had thought about this question during the 3 days of preparation. He knew his answer would shape humanity's future in the Galactic Council. I want the dragons to be free, he said simply. I want them recognized as sentient beings with full rights. I want slavery of any species to be illegal across council space. And I want to create a sanctuary where dragons and potential partners can meet as equals, without coercion or force. And if the council refuses, Zethral asked with menace in his voice, then I will take the 200 dragons who have already freed themselves and find a world far from here where they can live in peace. Daniel replied, but I hope it does not come to that, because there are threats in this galaxy that are bigger than any one species, and we should be working together instead of enslaving each other. The speaker called for a recess so the council could deliberate. Daniel was escorted to a waiting room where Lisa, Kevin, and the other bonded humans joined him. That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I have ever seen, Kevin said with a grin. You basically told the entire council that humans do not care about their power structures. Maybe that is exactly what they needed to hear, Lisa said. Every established species is so focused on maintaining their position that they forgot what really matters. Hours passed before the council reconvened. When Daniel returned to the chamber floor, he could feel the tension in the air. The speaker stood and the chamber fell silent. The Galactic Council has reached a decision, the speaker announced. After reviewing the evidence and testimony, we find that the Draconith are indeed sentient beings who have been wrongfully enslaved. Effective immediately, all Draconith are granted full citizenship rights within Council space, and any form of slavery is hereby banned across all member territories. Relief flooded through Daniel, but the speaker was not finished. However, the Council recognizes that this decision creates unprecedented challenges. The Veltheran Empire's military structure must be rebuilt. 200 dragons without handlers could pose a security risk, and we must ensure that future bonding occurs properly. The speaker turned to look directly at Daniel. Therefore, we are creating a new institution. The Dragon Sanctuary will be established on Meridian 7 under human administration. Daniel Carter will serve as its first director with full council authority. His mission is to facilitate proper bonding between Draconith and worthy partners from any species while ensuring that no dragon is ever enslaved again. Zethril looked like he wanted to protest, but the Velthoran council member placed a hand on his shoulder and whispered something that made the commander go pale. "There is one more matter," the speaker said grimly. "Our intelligence services have detected unusual Velthoran fleet movements near Earth's outer colonies. Ambassador Elaine, what can you tell us about this?" Victoria's face went white. "I have received no reports of hostile action. That is because the reports are being suppressed," the speaker said. "Elements within the Velthoran military are planning retaliation against Earth for the loss of their dragon fleet. They believe that making an example of humanity's colonies will restore their prestige." Daniel felt ice form in his stomach. Through his bond with Pirax, he sensed the dragon's fury. "How long do we have?" Daniel asked. The journey from the council station to Earth took 26 hours, even at maximum speed. Daniel spent most of that time in deep communion with Pirax, learning about the dragons who slept in Earth's oceans. The ancient dragon explained that his kind had visited Earth millions of years ago during what humans called the Mesozoic era. "We found your world beautiful and terrible," Pirax said in Daniel's mind as they flew through the void between stars. Life there fought constantly to survive. The seas were filled with predators larger than any we had seen. The land swarmed with creatures that would kill and eat anything that moved. Even the air was dangerous with flying hunters. But everywhere we looked, we saw determination. The will to live no matter the cost. "So you stayed?" Daniel asked. 30 of my clutchmates chose to sleep in the deep ocean trenches," Pirax replied. "They wanted to see what such a harsh world would eventually produce. I was younger then and more curious, so I left to explore other worlds. I have traveled the galaxy for eons and seen countless species rise and fall. But I always wondered about Earth and what became of the strong-willed creatures there. And now you know," Daniel said. "Yes. You mammals survived when the Great Extinction came. You adapted and evolved. You built civilizations and reached for the stars. My clutchmates were right to wait. You were worth waiting for." The other 6 bonded pairs flew in formation around Pirax. Each human was learning to push their dragon's capabilities further. Lisa had discovered that Seraph could share healing energy across their bond, which meant she could keep herself conscious even during extreme maneuvers. Ryan and Tempest had achieved speeds that approached 0.5 light speed without using FTL drives. Kevin found that Ironhide could extend protective fields to cover nearby allies. Nathan suddenly spoke through the enhanced communication network. "I am picking up the Velthoran fleet. They are already engaging our defensive platforms around Titan." Claire and Horizon pushed ahead to scout. The reconnaissance dragon's enhanced senses could perceive threats from incredible distances. "Confirming 50 Velthoran warships," Claire reported. "They have disabled our outer defenses and are advancing on the colony proper. Civilian casualties are being reported." Daniel felt rage building in his chest, but Pirax's calm presence steadied him. "Anger makes warriors reckless," the dragon counseled. "We must be smart as well as strong." They emerged from FTL near Saturn's orbit, and Daniel's enhanced vision could see the battle unfolding around Titan. Earth's colony on the moon housed 300,000 people, including research scientists and mining workers. The Velthoran fleet had deployed siege weapons and was systematically destroying defensive installations. "They are not trying to conquer," Kevin said with horror in his voice. "They are trying to send a message by killing everyone." Daniel opened the communication channel to the Velthoran fleet. "This is Daniel Carter speaking to Commander Zethril. I know you are leading this attack. Stand down immediately or face the consequences." Zethril's face appeared on the comm display, and his expression showed pure hatred. "You have destroyed everything the Velthoran Empire built. Our dragons are gone. Our military superiority is ended. Our council position is weakened beyond repair. All because you humans could not accept your place as inferior servants. So you decided to murder 300,000 innocent people. Daniel said, "They are not innocent. They are your kin. And through their deaths, the galaxy will learn what happens to those who defy Velthoran power." Zethral replied and cut the transmission. The Velthoran fleet opened fire on Titan's main habitation dome. If the shield failed, 300,000 people would die in seconds from explosive decompression. Daniel did not hesitate. Everyone engage. Priority is protecting the civilians. Destroy any ship that targets the colony. 7 dragon-human pairs dove into battle against 50 warships. The odds were impossible, but Daniel had learned that impossible was just another word for difficult. Pirax folded space around them and appeared directly in front of the main siege weapon. His bioplasma breath carved through the weapon's barrel before it could fire. Lisa and Seraph projected shields over the habitation dome while simultaneously healing damaged defensive platforms. The healer dragon's abilities were not meant for combat, but her defensive capabilities were incredible. Ryan and Tempest became a blur of motion, teleporting from ship to ship and targeting their weapon systems with surgical precision. Each strike disabled guns and missile launchers without destroying the entire vessel. Kevin and Ironhide positioned themselves as a mobile fortress, absorbing hits meant for their allies and reflecting the energy back at attackers. 3 Velthoran ships made the mistake of focusing fire on Ironhide simultaneously, and all 3 were destroyed by their own redirected weapons. Nathan and Whisper coordinated the chaos, predicting enemy movements and directing each bonded pair to maximum effect. 4 ships breaking formation to flank us, Nathan called out. Greg, Claire, intercept. Greg and Verdant released biospores that infected the flanking ship systems. Within moments, the vessels began firing on each other as their targeting computers were rewritten. Claire and Horizon marked priority targets for the rest of the team, but it was not enough. 7 dragons against 50 ships meant they were constantly on the defensive. Daniel could feel exhaustion creeping through his bond with Pirax. The ancient dragon had not fully recovered from the Krell battle, and this extended combat was draining his reserves quickly. We cannot hold them much longer, Kevin said, as Ironhide's shields flickered under sustained bombardment. Daniel made his decision. Pirax, call your clutchmates. Wake them now. The process takes time, little brother. I must focus completely, which means I cannot fight while I summon them, Pirax warned. Then we buy you that time, Daniel replied. Everyone form a defensive sphere around Pirax. He is about to wake the sleeping dragons. The 6 other bonded pairs moved into position, creating a protective formation, while Pirax descended toward Earth's atmosphere. The dragon's consciousness expanded outward, touching the vast oceans below, reaching down into the deep trenches where ancient beings slept. The Velthoran fleet recognized something was happening and redirected their entire force toward Pirax. 50 ships unleashed everything they had. Missiles and plasma cannons and kinetic weapons all aimed at the descending dragon. Hold the line, Daniel shouted as explosions erupted all around them. Lisa and Seraph absorbed hits that would have vaporized smaller ships. Ryan and Tempest moved so fast they left after images, destroying incoming missiles before they could reach Pirax. Kevin and Ironhide became a wall of reflected energy that sent attacks back at their sources. Daniel felt Pirax's consciousness diving deeper into Earth's oceans, touching minds that had not woken in millions of years. Clutchmates, I call you, the strong-willed ones we waited for need our aid. The time has come to rise. In the Pacific Ocean, 30 massive forms began to stir. They had slept through the age of dinosaurs, through the rise of mammals, through humanity's entire evolution from primitive primates to spacefaring civilization. Now they woke at their brother's call. Daniel saw them emerge through Pirax's shared senses. 30 dragons, each as large as aircraft carriers rising from the deep. Some were warriors with scales like armor plating. Others were scouts built for speed. Several were healers similar to Seraph. And the largest one was an ancient female named Omega, who had been the clutch leader when they first arrived on Earth. The sleeping dragons broke through the ocean's surface and launched towards space without hesitation. They had been dreaming of humanity's progress for eons, and now they came to fight alongside the species they had waited so long to meet. Show them. Omega's voice resonated in Daniel's mind. Show us what you are, children of the harsh world. Prove that our wait was not in vain. Daniel opened his mind completely, showing the ancient dragons everything: humanity's wars and art, suffering and joy, cruelty and compassion, failures and triumphs. He showed them humans fighting impossible odds and surviving through sheer determination. He showed them humans choosing kindness even when it was easier to hate. The 30 ancient dragons saw all of this in seconds, and their response was immediate. We fight for them, Omega declared. The battle shifted instantly. 30 unbonded dragons joined the fight, and the Velthoran fleet found itself hopelessly outmatched. These ancient beings had been alive when the architects first created the Draconid species. They knew combat techniques that had been forgotten for millennia. Omega did not bond with Daniel, but she followed his tactical directions because she recognized leadership when she saw it. The ancient dragon coordinated with her clutchmates in ways that demonstrated millions of years of experience. Commander Zethral's flagship tried to escape, but Pirax intercepted it. The ancient dragon's jaws clamped around the vessel's engines, disabling it without destroying the crew. You wanted to make an example, Pirax said to Zethral. So we will make one of you. You will stand trial for attempted genocide. The remaining Velthoran ships surrendered immediately. Their weapons were disabled, and they were escorted to holding positions by the ancient dragons. Daniel sagged with exhaustion as the battle ended. Through his bond, he could feel Pirax was equally drained. We did it, he said quietly.